Hello and welcome to Independent Thinking, the weekly podcast from Chatham House. I'm Bronwen Maddox, the director. This week we're looking at the latest on Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO. This week the Hungarian parliament finally ratified Finland's membership to the alliance 2 weeks after President Erdogan in Turkey gave his seal of approval following a meeting with the Finnish president. Sweden, however, remains trapped in limbo, with both Turkey and Hungary delaying Stockholm's membership and Erdogan in particular asking for more concessions. We'll discuss why Turkey and Hungary took issue with Sweden and Finland and their membership, what the strategic situation in the Baltic looks like now with only Finland in NATO, and the challenges facing Sweden amid fraught ties with President Erdogan. We'll also look ahead to Turkey's presidential election in May. Recent opinion polls point to a neck-and-neck race, with some polls even showing President Erdogan falling behind the opposition. Turkish voters will cast their votes on 14th of May, so we'll discuss the sentiment in Turkey ahead of that election and how the world might respond to a change in power in Ankara for the first time in 20 years. Joining us down the line is Henri Vanhanen, a research director with the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Welcome, Henri.
Thank you.
Very good to have you with us. And here in the studio with me to give us an insight into Turkey is Galip Dalay, an associate fellow with our Middle East and North Africa programme. Welcome back to the podcast in person this time, Galip.
Thank you.
Very good to have you here. Let's start first with Finland and Sweden and where they sit regarding NATO membership. Henri, perhaps you can take us into that position and what has happened with them both.
Well, where we stand right now is that it's very likely that Finland will be a member of NATO before Sweden. And this is due to the fact that Turkey has decided to split its national ratification process. We saw that after President Niinistö visited President Erdogan in Ankara, and after which we got the news that Turkey will continue the process with Finland, and we're actually expecting the ratification quite soon. And hence ending the process, we got the ratification from Hungary as well. Yet the problem seems to be that there's not yet a clear path for Sweden to go forward. We have heard from Hungary that they're expecting changes in the behavior between the government relations of Sweden and Hungary. And from Turkey, we are getting the same vague message saying that Sweden must do more in order to fulfill the criteria that was agreed upon in the Madrid summit in the trilateral agreement between Finland, Sweden and Turkey. So this is where we are right now.
Galip, just tell us why you think Turkey has tried to divide the two in this way.
I think the logic for Turkey has always been clear. Turkey made less of demand from Finland, more of the demand from Sweden, and I think by signaling the ratification of the Finnish application, Turkey is basically trying to send a message that it is not against the NATO expansion, but it is just making very concrete demands regarding its security. So that's, from Turkish point of view, has been quite clear, because the Turkish official position has been pro-NATO enlargement, even towards Ukraine and Georgia. So by ratifying the Finnish application, that's pretty much is in line with the Turkish position.
So what is its problem with Sweden?
I think thus far the three issue comes to fore in Turkey's narrative towards Sweden. And those are more or less the issues that Turkey has put into memorandum, the trilateral memorandum that it signed with Finland and Sweden at Madrid summit last year. The first one was the Turkey demanded Sweden and Finland to lift the arms embargo which they imposed following Turkey's military intervention into Syria in 2019 against the Syrian Kurdish SDF. And similar to many Western nations, they also imposed these arms embargoes, but that has been lifted now. The second one Turkey is making is saying that the Sweden has to take Turkey's security concerns much more seriously. Namely, that means doing more vis-a-vis the PKK, but also vis-a-vis the group called the Gülenists, which has been accused of committing the 2016 coup in Turkey. The trick that the Sweden has already actually strengthened its anti-terror law, but the trick is the Sweden makes a distinction, similar to many other NATO and European countries, between the PKK and the Syrian Kurdish PYD, whereas the Turkey wants the both to be treated the same. The third element is related to some of Turkey's extradition requests from Sweden. Related to the previous item, Turkey is asking Sweden to extradite certain Turkish nationals living in Sweden who Turkey accuses to have links to terrorism. Sweden, in response, say that any extradition request has to go through the due legal processes, so therefore is not going to extradite them soon.
Henri, what do you make of this? Do you think that these are substantial, serious, detailed challenges to Sweden, which Sweden can take one by one and answer, or is there more going on than this?
To a degree, yes. But then again, I think we also have to keep in mind that we should not consider this process as something that is for Finland and Sweden to solve bilaterally with Turkey. This was never the case in the process. I think this is more about having a significant political chip in your pocket right now. The same applies to Hungary. Now, this is a scenario where you can try to utilize and maximize your gains in a way that you put it in this framework of building some kind of a new approach to Turkish security concerns. Whereas, for example, in Finland and Sweden both, I think that the PKK has been considered a terrorist organization for a long time, and there's already been a bilateral cooperation between intelligence services on these issues. So, of course, this is sort of the public frame of this debate, when to ratify and when to not. But at the same time, a lot of it has to do with Turkish relationship with the Americans, the United States, and also with Turkey wanting to push its agenda on NATO, to not just discuss Russia or the high north or the eastern flank. This is about reminding NATO that it's a 360 degrees approach. And I think, for example, now that Turkey has ratified only Finland and gone forward with Finland, but not Sweden, this is also a scenario where Turkey can actually continue its discussions with NATO and the US. So by ratifying Finland at this point, but not Sweden, is something that actually...
Without looking like it was blocking everything at all. Galip, what about these wider points that Turkey might want from the United States and from NATO? For example, F-16 jets is one of the things that's been thrown into the speculation about whether that's something that Turkey wants from the United States, and President Joe Biden wants perhaps NATO not to be so preoccupied with Russia, not to be preoccupied with the High North. How much do you think it's part of that strategy?
I think the US is significantly part of this discussion in one way or another, because this disagreement is not a bilateral one between Turkey and Sweden. The US has always been part of it, and let's not forget, in the last NATO summit, it was the last-minute US intervention that saved the day. The Biden-Erdogan meetings, the US pledged that it will support Turkey's request for buying the F-16 jets from the US. So I think we will need a similar US intervention prior to the Vilnius summit in July to save the day. And this is quite critical because at the time of the Russian aggression in Ukraine, the NATO, the Western Alliance, the Transatlantic Alliance, needs to have a show of unity. This is the Erdogan or the Turkey is not doing this as a favor to Russia, is not making these demands. But the discord within the NATO, the discord within the Transatlantic Alliance, is a good news for Russia for sure. As I mentioned earlier, the official position remains to be pro-enlargement, but the fact that this enlargement is being delayed, is being postponed, and the fact that there is a disagreement within the NATO alliance between two major Western powers is a good news for Russia. So at this stage, at a time of the Russian aggression in Ukraine at an era that is being defined by the great power competition between the West, Russia and China, it is more critical than ever that the West, the transatlantic allies, will show off the unity in Vilnius. And for this to happen, the US needs to engage in this conversation.
And I just want to pick up just one small point there. You say you don't think Turkey is doing it as a favour to Russia, but Turkey has done very well, hasn't it, out of being in the middle, if you like, during Russia's aggression in Ukraine, indeed receiving many Russians and Russian money.
Absolutely. The Turkey has basically maintained this very close relationship, and also many Russian businesses, the many Russian money coming to Turkey, and then Russian tourists as well. So those are quite critical for Turkey. At the same time, maintaining this good relation with Kiev.
Henri, you haven't really mentioned Hungary. What Hungary's role is in all this?
I think Hungary is a junior partner for Turkey in this choreography, because as soon as Turkey announced it will go forward with just Finland but not Sweden, then immediately we heard that Hungary will do the same. And this happened just a day before President Niinistö of Finland and Erdogan met, and also Orban and Erdogan met. So to me, it seems that Hungary can continue to postpone as long as Turkey can, in the sense that it seems that Budapest seems to think that if they do a favor to Turkey by not putting all the pressure for them for being the last ones that are still pending, they actually seek to get some kind of a counter service from the Turkish side at some point. So to me, it seems that Hungary is maximizing its gains by sort of trying to have a position where it doesn't have to push Turkey forward, but also at the same time we know that there's this dispute between the EU and Hungary on EU funds that are related to rule of law development. So to me, it seems that Hungary will just keep this process going as long as it can in order to see what it can get out of it.
Finally, to wrap this up, what does the security of the Baltic look like now that NATO has got full access to the region?
Well, certainly if we look at the capabilities that all the Nordic countries combined can provide, you have over 200 modern aircraft, you have submarine capabilities, you have the largest artillery in Western Europe in Finland, for example. You have Finland with a wartime strength of 280,000 troops, and both countries bring significant access to the high north, to the Arctic and the Baltic Sea region, bringing strategic depth when it comes to security of supply and being able to fight a war if needed in the region. I think it creates a significant deterrent, something that Russia must take into account. And now that there's no limits between the Nordic countries and Nordic Baltic countries on where defense cooperation can go and reach out to, there's huge potential to build this so-called Nordic fortress that within NATO that strengthens NATO's ability to execute collective security and defense in this region. So this will be probably one of the geopolitically significant events that has taken in this century.
Yes, and Finland's argument, all this, not wanting to be parted from Sweden in joining NATO, as look, there's two long coastlines here and it doesn't make any sense to just bring one into NATO. Let me ask you whether it makes any practical difference that Sweden isn't in NATO, given the desire to have NATO's influence over this region.
Well, there are two aspects to this. On the short term, if Sweden's not involved in NATO yet, that's not a problem. We have Sweden that's a NATO invitee, surrounded by NATO countries, and also by countries that it has had very close defense cooperation for the past years that exceeds peace times and goes all the way to crisis times. So the need to involve Sweden in the regional defense arrangement is not going to go anywhere. But the problem is that if this process goes on for too long for Sweden, if we talk about years that Sweden is not involved in NATO, which I think is highly unlikely. Yet if this was the case, this would mean that NATO's operational planning in the region could not take place with Sweden in it, because NATO's operational planning is only open to full members. So that's why, as long as Sweden is not within NATO, it will slow down the process of trying to plan how to defend this region in this new environment with a Nordic enlargement and also with a more aggressive Russia. So that is the problem. But to be honest, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Turkey will eventually run out of chips to play, and this is, if it's not by Vilnius, then it's by the end of the year. I'm certain of that.
Let's turn then to Turkey itself. We have been talking quite a bit about Turkey already, and over all of this discussion hangs the upcoming election in May and what this might mean. Galip, the latest polls are getting closer, and President Erdogan's position is even slipping behind the opposition, despite various attempts he has made to see off various opponents. What is the position now?
Well, as you said, this is like really a critical election for Turkey. At stakes are the future of Turkish democracy, the future of the domestic political order in Turkey, Turkey's place in the world, the future of Turkish economy. So the one of the most important things about this election that you cannot foretell the result of it. Erdogan has been in power for 2 decades, and during this time we could foretell the result of almost all the elections before the election day, because the opposition stood very little chance of defeating him. Now the polls are really tight and the opposition has advantage, but this advantage is still a fragile one. So the opposition, many respected polls shows that opposition is leading the race, but it's still with very small margin. So it's still fragile. It can be reversed. So therefore, the result can go either way. But in the coming weeks, the political climate will be tenser even because, as I mentioned, the stakes are really high for the both sides. Like the Turkish political system at stake because...
Just take us into that for a moment. What's at stake? What do you think President Erdogan would do if he wins? And you're implying to jeopardize Turkish democracy, to undermine it more. What do you think the opposition would do?
I think if Erdogan wins, we will see more or less what we are seeing now. The further personalization of power, the deinstitutionalization of Turkey. We will see the current foreign policy, which is basically an geopolitical balancing act between the major powers in the world, the continuation of this unorthodox economy, which we see that made Turkey to experience one of the great economic crises, and also there is a significant difference of personality when you look at both candidates. So the opposition promises to change the political system from the presidential to parliamentary system, because the Turkey changed the system in 2017, return to more orthodox policies. Probably we will see a redress when it comes to Turkish-Russian relationship, Turkish-Chinese relationship. So we will see slightly a shift towards the West, and in recent years, as I said, like Erdogan represented the personalization of power. The opposition promises the institutionalization of power, but I have to also make a bit some caution is warranted, particularly in foreign policy terms. Post-Erdogan doesn't mean anti-Erdogan. It means a different from now. We will see a different Turkey, but we will not see completely, reversing Erdogan's foreign policy course. For instance, when it comes to Eastern Mediterranean, which is very important in Turkish-European relationship, Turkish-Greek relationships, we will hear a politer language coming from Ankara, but not much change of the policy in this regard.
What about towards Europe? Because I think a lot of people looking at Turkey are thinking, well, if Erdogan didn't win, would Turkey suddenly be much more emphatically pro-Europe?
Yes and no. So the yes part, the language will change, and that matters. So we will see probably a more polite and more kinder language. So not these bombastic exchanges every day with different European leadership. So that's matter. Secondly, we will see probably Turkey complying more with the European Court of Human Rights. That means releasing of many prisoners, the political prisoners that you see in Turkey, such as the pro-Kurdish leader Selahattin Demirtas, the philanthropist Osman Kavala. So that also matters. probably will see more engagement between Turkey and Europe. So the Turkey being invited to foreign policy dialogue with Europe, that in itself is important. We will see, the nature of Turkish-Russian relationship will change, because in the end, we don't know to what extent the current form of Turkish-Russian relationship, to what extent it is Erdogan-Putin relationship, to what extent this is Turkey-Russia relationship. So that will change to some extent, so which also is a good news when it comes to Europe, because Turkey is a major actor when it comes to European security. But the fundamental issues in Turkish-European relationship will remain the same. For instance, the fundamental one is the framework of this relationship. Turkey is officially a candidate country, and neither Turkey nor Europe believes that this process will ever happen. But none of them could come up with a much more exciting replacement to this. So the fundamental problem will continue, but the crisis management will be easier.
So what you say, it's pivotal, this election, and many people agree with you. On the other hand, I think I'm very struck by what you're describing, which is a difference of stance, a difference of direction of travel, but not a completely different result. Henri, listening to this, what do you make of it?
Fundamentally, the issue with, for example, Finland and Sweden and NATO and Turkey, this has never been about Turkey objecting NATO enlargement per se. I mean, that's not the case. If we look at, for example, the discussion that has been going on in the Turkish parliament and by the Turkish officials, it has never been about objecting NATO enlargement. It's been more about trying to sort of imprint an understanding of the certain principles that drive Turkish foreign security and defense policy, trying to understand the Turkish security environment, and it's been hence a more perhaps principled approach. And quite frankly, I don't think that whether it be Erdogan and his party that continues in power or not, that this will be a decisively issue for the Turks. I don't see that. I don't see it that way.
Galip, finally, just over this, should we assume that the elections will be free and fair?
Well, I mean, there are many legitimate concerns, and we saw this in the last municipal election in 2019, when basically politically the election board forced a second round. But the result has been even a more resounding defeat for the government. Whereas, in the first round, the mayor of Istanbul won the race by 13,000 votes. When the election board forced a second round, then it lost by 800,000. So I am still concerned. I have concerns about this, but I think if there will be a clear attempt of fraud, I think then the government will lose even bigger. So in this regard, I still have trust in the election.
Great. Well, we'll be doing a lot on Turkish democracy and the election, both before and after this critical poll. But with that, we are going to have to wrap up. So a big thank you to my guests, Galip Dalay and Henri Vanhanen. Do follow us all on Twitter. And a reminder that you can find all of our podcasts on Apple, Spotify and all major platforms, as well as through our social media. So do like, follow and subscribe. Please do leave us a review. To read more from our experts, or to find out more about our events, or to become a member, and we would love to have you. Don't forget to visit our website, chathamhouse.org, and you can find there the recent work of our Middle East and North Africa programme, including work on Turkey. Next week, we're going to be taking a short break for Easter, but we'll be back the following week to discuss Russia's nuclear posture and the basing of nuclear weapons in Belarus. Goodbye from me, Bronwen Maddox. Thank you for listening.